Before we begin, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Not because everyone says it, but because what you're about to hear today is the kind of story most people scroll past without realizing what they're missing. If you care about history, money, power, and the quiet objects that outlast empires, you're in the right place. Now let me ask you something. What if I told you that one of the smallest coins ever used in South Africa carries a story heavier than gold? A coin so easily overlooked that millions of people spent it, dropped it, or ignored it, never knowing what it would someday represent. This is not a story about pocket change. This is a story about time, survival, politics, and how ordinary objects quietly become extraordinary. Today, we're talking about the South Africa 1/2 cent coin dated 1979. At first glance, it looks unimpressive. Tiny. Light. Almost insignificant. The kind of coin a man wouldn't bother bending down to pick up if it fell on the street. But history doesn't care about size. History cares about moments. And 1979 was a moment loaded with tension, transformation, and pressure that most people alive today only vaguely remember. To understand this coin, you have to step back into a world that felt very different. South Africa in 1979 was standing on unstable ground. The country was deep in the apartheid era, isolated from much of the world, economically strained, politically charged, and socially divided. Every decision made by the government, even something as small as minting a coin, was shaped by forces most people never saw. Inflation was creeping in. The value of small denominations was shrinking. The world was moving away from tiny coins, but South Africa hadn't fully let go yet. The 1/2 cent was already becoming impractical, already losing relevance in daily transactions. And yet, in 1979, it was still struck. Why? Because systems don't collapse all at once. They linger. They resist change. They leave behind artifacts that later generations struggle to explain. This coin was born at the edge of usefulness. That alone gives it weight. The 1/2 cent coin represented a time when money still tried to pretend it had precision. When governments still believed that fractions mattered. When the idea of rounding up felt like surrender for working men in that era, the kind of men watching this right now, money was tangible. You earned it with your hands, your back, your time. You felt its weight. You heard its sound on a counter. You counted it carefully because every cent meant something, and yet, this coin was already slipping through fingers. Most men didn't save them. They were too small to care about. They cluttered pockets. They slowed down transactions. Shopkeepers grew tired of them. Children played with them. They vanished into couch cushions and car floors, which is exactly why surviving examples matter. Coins don't become powerful because everyone protects them. They become powerful because almost no one does. The design itself tells a quiet story. On one side, the national symbols meant to project strength, unity, and permanence. On the other, a value so small it almost mocks the imagery around it. That contrast is not accidental. Governments often use money to tell citizens who they are and what the future will look like. In 1979, that message was strained. The country was telling one story. Reality was telling another. By the early 1980s, the writing was on the wall. The 1/2 cent was becoming obsolete. Production would not last many more years. Eventually, it would disappear from circulation entirely, remembered only by those who lived through it or those who study the past carefully. And here's where things get interesting. When something disappears quietly, without ceremony, without nostalgia, it creates a blind spot. People don't hoard what they believe will always be there. They don't preserve what they assume is worthless. They throw it away. That's how rarity is born. Most 1/2 cent coins from this period were melted, lost, corroded, or destroyed. Very few were kept in pristine condition. Even fewer were set aside intentionally. And fewer still survived untouched by time, moisture, handling, or neglect. Collectors understand this better than anyone. Condition is everything. Two coins from the same year can exist in completely different universes of value depending on how they survived. One might be worth almost nothing. The other can stop seasoned collectors in their tracks, but there's more to this coin than condition. 1979 sits in a narrow historical window. It's late enough that the denomination was dying, but early enough that it still represented a functioning system. It's a year that doesn't scream importance to casual observers, which makes it dangerous to underestimate. Men who've lived long enough know this truth well. The most important moments don't announce themselves, they slip by quietly while everyone's distracted. This coin witnessed a turning point. The slow unraveling of an economic model. The beginning of the end for certain monetary traditions. The pressure building beneath a society that would soon change forever. And coins, unlike paper, survive. They don't care about politics. They don't care about borders. They don't care who's in power. They sit. They wait. They carry stories forward whether anyone listens or not. That's why coins like this resurface decades later and shock people, not because of what they are, but because of what they've outlived. Think about the men who handled this coin in 1979. Factory workers, farmers, shop owners, clerks, fathers putting food on the table. None of them imagined that this tiny piece of metal would someday be discussed in terms of legacy, scarcity, or value. They were focused on survival, on responsibility, on tomorrow, and that's what gives this coin its emotional weight. It's a relic of ordinary life under extraordinary pressure. Over the years, collectors began to notice patterns. Certain years became harder to find. Certain mint conditions became almost mythical. Stories circulated quietly in collector circles, not loudly, not publicly, but in serious conversations between people who knew what to look for. And 1979 kept coming up, not as hype, not as noise, but as a quiet, persistent presence, the kind that makes experienced men pause before speaking, because in collecting, silence often means significance. This coin doesn't scream wealth. It whispers it doesn't dazzle with gold or silver content. It challenges you to understand context, survival, and timing. It rewards patience and knowledge, not impulse. That's why it appeals to a certain type of man, men who value history, men who respect endurance, men who understand that real power doesn't always announce itself. If you're still listening right now, you're probably one of them. And here's the truth most people don't want to hear: the biggest financial surprises in history rarely come from things that were obviously valuable at the start. They come from things dismissed, ignored, laughed at, or underestimated. This coin lived that life: ignored, spent, lost, forgotten, until it wasn't. In the next part, I'm going to take you deeper. We'll talk about survival rates, what separates an ordinary example from an extraordinary one, and why this specific coin has become a point of serious attention among high-level collectors. And at the very end of this story, I'll reveal a number that most people will find hard to believe, but not yet.